Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Bill Murphy. It's nice to have you with us. My guest today is Anita Bartholomew. Her new book is titled Sacrificial Lambs. Anita, nice to see you today.
Good to see you, Bill.
Let's begin, if you will, just with kind of a brief overview of the subject matter of this book, this book about sacrificial lambs.
Yeah, the book at its core is about how basically half of Western society got indoctrinated without even realizing it into this bizarre belief system, and how our major institutions, medical, media, mental health, educational, government, all became ideologically captured. And the ultimate victims of this were, of course, children, teens, and young adults who became the sacrificial lambs.
And you're talking about when you say became sacrificial lambs, we're talking about things that we've come to see of late, transitioning about young boys deciding that they wanted to be girls or young girls deciding that they wanted to be boys. Exactly. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah. So
exactly. But gender ideology isn't something that children just decide. It's something that they are literally brainwashed into, and sometimes as early as kindergarten. So a teacher will tell these children, and this is part of the curriculum in many, many schools, they're told, well, when you were born, the doctor only guessed what sex you were. You might be a boy, might be a girl, you might be a little of both, and you might be neither. And so this is a little kid, 6, 7 years old, maybe, still believes in Santa, is going to believe everything the teacher tells him,
yeah.
and is now thoroughly confused about what they call it gender, but they really mean sex. Thoroughly confused about what sex he is. And some of them end up thinking, well, maybe whatever problems I have, they're because I'm the wrong sex.
Yeah. I think most of us are aware that this is happening, but your research the time you took to investigate this, I'm thinking that a lot of people who read your book are going to be surprised, and maybe a lot of people are going to be shocked. Your thoughts?
I think you're right, Bill. As a matter of fact, I was very shocked as I researched this book. And one of the most shocking things I found was that some of the people behind promoting transgenderism were also promoting the normalization of fetishism and pedophilia. These are not separate issues, as people who read the book will discover.
Anita, I believe you point out with honesty that all the major medical associations, the Democratic Party leadership, medical community disagree with your take on this gender ideology. So my question, quite frankly, is basically what you're saying. Correct me if I'm wrong. They are all wrong, and you are right.
I know. And when I looked at all this in the beginning, I kept saying to myself, no, this can't be right.
Yeah.
And I didn't write about it for a very long time because I said, you know, what if I'm wrong? Uh, all these experts say that this is good for children, this is life saving care. And you look everywhere. You look at the major media, you look at the medical associations, as you say, and they all say, "Oh, this is great." So I went down several rabbit holes. I can't tell you how many thousands of court documents from people who were suing when their children were caught up in this. I can't tell you how many research papers I read, how many experts that I spoke to, until I finally said, okay, yeah, this is the most amazing case of ideological capture I've ever seen. And I think in the 21st century, this is it.
Let's get into a little more detail about what you talked about a second ago. Talk about the risks of pharmaceutical and surgical transition? And also, how young are some of these transitions beginning, Anita?
Yeah, it's very young. Puberty in girls can start as young as 8, in boys as young as 9. And that's when they will give these kids puberty blockers. And there is something called precocious puberty, which these are meant to stop. So if a child starts puberty at, say, 5 years old, they'll give them a puberty blocker just long enough so that they don't have puberty much earlier than it's natural to have it.
Right.
If you have, if you put a little girl on a puberty blocker at age 8 because she says she thinks she's a boy, well, first of all, puberty is around the time when childhood gender confusion, which actually is a real thing and isn't, it can start in toddlerhood where kids just get confused. And they usually, they'll grow up to be gay later. But puberty is the time when they figure it out and they say, oh, no, I really am the sex I am. And, they just go on and they grow up to be normally gay kids. If you're on a puberty blocker, your brain develops during puberty. So the ability to make decisions, to understand how to execute certain functions, this all happens during puberty. And if you don't go through puberty, then your brain doesn't develop. We don't really understand exactly how much we are causing damage when we put on, but we do know that some kids in a couple of studies have been shown to lose about 10 IQ points. So that's just cognitive. Then we have skeletal. So there have been some children who have actually gone through osteoporosis, which is something that
Hmm.
people get at 65.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, the skeleton isn't developing. Then, of course, you won't grow to your full height. And because you're not developing all these different ways that you would during puberty, you don't develop the understanding of being a boy or girl because you haven't made that leap. So you're more likely to go on to cross-sex hormones. And once you're on cross-sex hormones, in addition to everything else that can happen on cross-sex hormones, you're sterile because the testes and the ovaries never develop.
And you're saying some of this starts as early as 8 or 9 years old in some children?
Yes.
Now, I mean, isn't that against the law?
Shouldn't it be? Shouldn't it be? But we have such an ideologically captured society that, like you're 8 years old and somebody says to you, well, if you go on these drugs, you'll probably never have an orgasm. Does a child know what an
Yeah.
orgasm
Yeah.
is?
Yeah.
You'll never have children. Well, I'm 8 years old. I don't care. So yeah, it to me it's child abuse. But uh, these some of these people who work in gender clinics are so certain that they are right, so certain that children should be put on these blockers that it just doesn't occur to them the harm that they're doing. And they frighten parents. They tell parents, well, if your little boy says he's a girl and you don't affirm him and you don't put him on these experimental drugs, would you rather have a dead son or a live daughter? Because
Mm,
he's going
mm.
to commit suicide. That's not
Wow. Wow.
that's not true.
Yeah.
There were a couple of surveys done and they were disseminated on the internet to people who volunteered and who were all part of the so-called trans community. And they were asked, well, have you ever considered committing suicide? And a large portion of them said yes. But that the surveys never said, well, did you consider it before or after you
Yeah.
took these drugs? Did you consider it before or after? So what we know now from research from Sweden is that when they compared just the population of Sweden to people who had gone through the surgeries, they were 19 times more likely to commit suicide if they had had these trans surgeries than the general population.
Wow.
There are other studies that show that all of these different interventions are creating more mental health problems for these kids and young people. They do not in any way prevent suicide. They may, in fact, be the cause.
Anita, why did we, the general public, why have we not heard more of what you're talking about?
Well, that's the greatest question. And you know, our major mainstream media, sorry,
Yeah.
unfortunately are part of the problem. So, you know, this came out of academia.
Yeah.
The queer theory, social justice theory, all these kids who came out of academia for 4 years at least, and 2 or 3 more if they were in grad school, heard nothing but, you know, how important it was to uh, affirm people, how queer was the best thing, how it was terrible to be cis heteronormative.
Yeah.
And so they come out with this ideology and then they spread out to all these different professions. So they're in education, they're in mental health, and they're in the media. And the major media, you'll see, will talk about how gender affirming care is life saving care. How when when states try to pass laws that limit the medical profession from putting kids through these horrible procedures, they will call it anti-LGBTQ legislation.
Yeah.
So you get a very skewed view of what's really going on. So if I read New York has just passed this anti-LGBTQ legislation, as a good liberal, I would think, oh, what are they doing to gay people? But it's not about gay people. It's about protecting children.
Yeah. I think everybody's ears just perked up when you identified yourself as a liberal.
Well,
I
yeah,
think,
I'm a lifelong liberal. This is
yeah.
what I am. And this ideology is the absolute opposite of liberal. It's authoritarian. It tells you you must not in any way question anything that we say, because if you do that, you're a bigot, you're a transphobe. And people respond to these words and they think, oh my God, I don't want to be a bigot.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go along, you
Let
know?
me ask you what I'm going to ask you one final question, and then I will let you touch on any areas that we haven't touched on that you would like to. The people that you just mentioned and the organizations, because my final question for you was going to be who or what is the enemy? Did you just tell us who the enemy is? Is there an enemy?
The enemy is a belief.
Yeah.
These aren't bad people. They just have bad information and they have, well, some of them are bad people. The people who are making money on this are, and who will fight to the death now that
Yeah.
it's beginning to be exposed. But most of the people who promote this ideology really believe that they're doing good. They really believe that they're good people. Now, and that's the problem. That's why we have such a horrible situation here. I mean, I covered one story of a woman whose son thought he was a girl, and her friend, who was his pediatrician for all his life, behind her back, helped him to use illegal black market hormones because she thought she was doing good.
Yeah.
There's another case of a little girl who got the idea that she was a boy, and her therapist helped her develop a plan to run away from home. Thought she was being a good person, right?
Yeah.
Another case, a little 10-year-old girl. Her teacher first indoctrinated her into believing that she was a little boy.
Yeah.
And the little girl was already starting to say, no, no, I'm not really a little boy. But the teacher kept emailing and texting this little girl and saying, you know, as I told you, if you need to get away someplace safe, you can come live with me.
Mm.
She
Wow.
thinks she's doing something
Yeah.
good here.
Yeah.
This is what happens when people become involved in cults. And this truly is very cult-like.
Wow.
They are not trying to be evil people. They are not trying to be bad people. The enemy is the belief.
Anita, before we say goodbye, we've touched on a number of topics. I think we have a pretty good idea what Sacrificial Lambs is going to be about. But is there anything else that you would like to touch on before we say goodbye?
Uh, well, I think one thing that's important is that when you look at boys going into girls' sports, that's one area that people are so aware is so bonkers
Mhm.
that even 70 some odd percent of Democrats say, oh, no, no, that's a bridge too far. Because what's going on in his head doesn't matter when it's his body that's competing
Yeah.
against girls. I think that people, I think that most people realize if they think about it, there's something that's not quite right here, but they don't dare think about it because if they do, if they even say, well, I'm not sure about this,
Yeah.
someone's going to call them a bigot. Someone's going to call them a transphobe. But I do think that we're very close to a place where people are going to start listening to one another and stop being afraid of talking to one another about this.
It's very interesting that you point that out because if there is one area where the public has gotten involved in the conversation, it's primarily, I think, in swimming. When a man who was transitioned into a woman is competing against women, and they will point out they think and they believe this is unfair because he may or may not be a woman now, depending on your point of view, but he was born as a male.
Yes, and he's
Yeah,
a 6'4" male, and his
yeah,
shoulders are like this.
yeah,
And you see him on the pedestal where they're giving out the awards, and you see the young
yeah.
woman next to him, and she's
Yeah.
like, it, you just have to know this is insane. This is not
Well,
fair.
as I said, I think many people are going to be surprised and many shocked when they read your book, Sacrificial Lambs. As I understand it, the release date is early November. Yeah.
Yes,
And it,
Pitchstone Publishing. The release date is November 4th, 2025, but it's available for pre-order now. Yes, thank you very much for taking the time to talk
oh,
to me.
it's been my pleasure. Again, just to be sure for the people who are watching, Amazon.com is one of the sources where they can find the book, correct? Yeah.
Yes, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, really wherever you buy
All of
books.
them. Okay.
Mhm.
Sacrificial Lambs, Anita Bartholomew. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Good to see you.
Thank you so much, Bill.